Alright everybody, we're firing this one off. Welcome back for another English 370 lecture on YouTube. Today, more semantics, but we're gonna change. We're gonna have a subtle shift happen in today's class where we start to shift over and talk a little bit more about pragmatics as opposed to semantics. And roughly the distinction we're gonna be working with in this, is my audio working? Yes. Is that semantics is more about the literal meanings of things. These are rough definitions, where pragmatics relies more on context and has more wiggle room available to it. It's what people actually sort of do with meanings, do with words. What's the intent? More of those kinds of questions. So we're going to see a little bit of that shift happen in today's class. In order to start off this talk, we're going to watch a YouTube clip. We get a little YouTube inception going on here. I am a YouTube video, and I'm going to be directing you to a YouTube video. I'm going to try and bring it up, and I want you to listen to this clip and think about what is going on in this interaction. Hopefully you can hear the clip. If you can't hear the clip for whatever reason, the link is right here, and the slides are also posted online on Moodle, so feel free to access it that way. If you can't hear it, pause it. Copy and paste this. Go watch the YouTube video. Then come back to this YouTube video. Otherwise, I'm going to play it right now. Watch my fancy tech. Oh, yeah. Hold on. Not that fancy of tech. Cool. Here goes.
I need a room.
Just you?
Pardon?
Is it just for you, the room?
What difference does that make?
It's a different rate for two. And if you got pets, dog, cat, it's an extra $10.
What if I got a fish?
Excuse me?
Would a fish cost me $10? Or what if I kept spiders or mice? What if I had bacteria?
Sir, bacteria are not pets.
Could be.
Sir, perhaps you'd be happier in a different motel?
I just want to know the policy. You see, I'm a student of institutions.
Sir, do you have a pet or not?
No, it's just me.
I'm trying to get you back. Hold on. Go away, Malvo. Be banished with your creepiness. Ah. Oh, we got rid of him, finally. I know he's back. Alright. Okay, so we watched that creepy video from the movie Fargo. If you haven't seen it, you now know what to expect or not expect. Hold on, I need to banish him from my screen as well. Boom, there we go. And it's an interesting interaction, right? Creepy clip, creepy person, but an interesting interaction here with this discussion of pets and what it means to be a pet. The take-home point from that clip and what we're going to spend some time talking about today is, are the meanings of words in a language fixed such that they have a specific meaning or not? And here we get a glimpse. We've had several throughout these lectures of places where this kind of set theory, truth conditional view of language gets weird, but here's another one, right? What if there's different interpretations? What if there's different meanings for the same kind of word? In this case, what it means to be a pet, as Malvo very creepily points out. So we see here that the word meanings are kind of underspecified, not unspecified. They still have some sort of content that people agree on, right? That conventionalization still holds. But even when that conventionalization does hold, there's still an underspecification going on here. And that the way we interpret words isn't just literal, right? And this is one of the major problems with that sort of truth functional set theory notation, is that we're not always being literal. We saw this problem with things like idioms as well as questions, and that's where we're going to have to rely more, a little bit heavier on pragmatics. We're going to look at ways we can account for this. Under specification right now. That's one of our jobs for today. And we looked at this series of sentences that looked a little bit like maybe contradictions or something, and they were a little bit odd. right? So we looked at the Malvo one just now, but we also saw this sentence earlier at the beginning of our semantics lectures. If person A, Lucy, says driving from Indianapolis to Chicago takes 3 hours, and Rob says no, it takes 2 hours, 59 minutes, and 37 seconds, like, that's weird, right? It's a weird thing to say. Why is that weird? Well, it's like it's close. We have this non-literal. Is that literally a different time? A different amount of time? Yes, that's literally a different amount of time, but contextually with this under specification, we don't really care about the difference between 3 hours and 2 hours, 59 minutes, and 37 seconds, right? Or, right, if you say everybody was asleep in Chicago at 4 a.m., somebody says, like, no, you're wrong. There's 2 people that are awake at this certain spot, right? Like, we don't care about that kind of stuff. So there's a sense in which these are all kind of pragmatically odd. Odd sentences, yeah. You saw the oddness of the Malvo one, and we can get the oddness from these ones as well. They're not contradictory, actually, right? One viewpoint here is that we have some wiggle room that emerges by way of meaning, right? There's a fuzziness of these boundaries here that allow us to have slightly different interpretations than the literal actual meaning. And one of our jobs then is, kind of deciding how much wiggle room is tolerable. How much wiggle room will we put up with? That's our job and can also be kind of problematic. Returning to a set theory viewpoint of this kind of question of different interpretations and fuzzy boundaries, we can look at pets, right, in the Malvo problem here, we can look at pets as having different sets. Different interpretations of the word pets can entail different sets. So here we have, we could call this pets definition number 1, pets set number 1, which includes cats and dogs, but we could also have pets, another sort of definition of pets or interpretation of pets, which includes cats, dogs, rabbits, and goldfish. Another one that includes cats, dogs, rabbits, goldfish, bacteria, and microbes, right? And so what Malvo is talking about in this odd exchange that we opened class with is, what's the interpretation of pets? Is it this one, which seems to be what the front desk lady is implying there? Or is it this one? He asks about fish, right? Something that's not in this set, but is in this set. Or is it even about this? What if I had bacteria, right? He wants to know where the boundaries are. He's a student of institutions, as he says very creepily. And we need to know, right? So Malvo is very weird in this situation, but it does matter in some sense, right? Like, you do actually need to know what set somebody's talking about in order to make sense of the question that this lady at the front desk asks, which is, do you have any pets? Or to make sense of the sentence, I don't have any pets with me right now, we need to know which set we're talking about, right? So it can matter. It matters, right? So let's look at a couple ways that semanticists and pragmaticists have dealt with this kind of under-specification of semantic meaning, right? We're going to look at 2 different solutions here. They both kind of get at the same idea. They're not 2 super distinct ones. So the first one is just to say that word meanings are inherently fuzzy, right? So that word meanings built into it have this kind of wiggle boundaries, these fuzzy boundaries where, sometimes these things are in it and sometimes they're not. The other way we can approach this is to say that words have fixed, clear-cut meanings, right? That they always mean the same thing, but that depending on the context, we kind of choose to interpret them differently. We'll look at how these things look, and they're not mutually exclusive. Let's look at the fuzzy boundaries version. That's often called prototype theory. This is a theory developed by Eleanor Rosch and George Lakoff, who you see pictured here. And the idea is that when you have a set, again, if we think of these sorts of noun and verb ideas in our set theory notation, that there's They denote a set that has lots of different members. The idea of prototype theory is that not all members of the set are created equal. That there's central members to this set, and there's peripheral members of the set. So we'll do a tiny experiment real quick. Humor me, if you will. So I want you to, right now, sitting wherever you're watching this, picture in your head a bird. Think of a bird and picture it in your head. Picture a bird as concretely and definitively as you can. Think of a bird. Everybody have your bird? Do you got it? All right, sweet. Now, chances are that when I asked you to think of and picture a bird, you pictured something more in this central sphere. You pictured something that looked like a robin or a sparrow or a dove, right? Chances are you didn't think of a penguin. Am I right? You probably also didn't think of an ostrich, right? Are those still birds? Yeah, definitely still birds. Are they as much birds as all the other birds? Well, yeah, in some sense, like a bird's a bird. But in another sense, there's a way in which they're less prototypical of birds. They're less central to the membership of the set of birds. They're still in the set of birds, but they're less central to that. And how could we can think of like fairly concrete ways here of defining this kind of thing, right? What features do we think of when we think of birds? Well, we think of feathers, and we think of flying, and we think of, right? And we can actually see that some of these outside members don't actually have all of those features that we associate with birds, like flight, right? Penguins and ostriches here on the peripheries can't fly. Some of these other have very distinctive features, which they may have all the features we associate with birds, but they also have extra features, right? Like giant beaks in the case of a toucan, or colorful tails in the case of a peacock or a pheasant, right? And so we might not think of those because we don't necessarily associate that with birds, right? My favorite part about this picture is the title, Figure 1. This is birdiness rankings, where we've ranked all the birds according to their birdiness level. Sorry, ostriches, you have extraordinarily low birdiness for a bird. So here we can see one approach to this sort of fuzzy boundaries under specification approach to word meaning. Right? If we think of this in terms of pets and prototypes, we see that like cats and dogs are a prototypical pet, right? Where rabbits and fish are good pets, but they're less good than cats and dogs, and like bacteria like are maybe not even pets, but possibly depending on what your definition is. Right? So there's more central members and more peripheral members. And this is just built in part of the meaning of pets, or part of the meaning of birds is this core membership and this peripheral membership. Right? That's one approach to this underspecification of words. And one of the ways in which we find we get this fuzziness, this underspecification. An alternate view to this is that meanings are fixed, and it's the contexts that matter. So this view says, no. Like, the meanings are always the same. The meanings don't, they don't change at all. But instead, depending on what situation you're in, you can choose a different subset or higher order set. So here in this view, pets always means all of these things. Excuse me. So what we notice from this perspective is that the definition of pets is always the same. It's always the same. It always includes all of these members. But in different contexts, here denoted by these subscripts, context 1, context 2, context 3, different members of the set are highlighted. 1 second. Oh no, let me turn myself off so you can see. Right, so here, the idea is that for the word pet, the semantics of this word, the semantics of this word means something like any living being that humans carry around, right? Always inclusive of all of these things. But pragmatically, we select out a subset of these things on a contextual basis. We let the context guide our meaning of the word. Turning myself back on. Pow. Not that one. All right. So these are the differing viewpoints there. We can either say that, we can either say that there's kind of this prototype theory where built in to these, the fuzziness is built into the word itself, where these are inherently kind of less good birds than these kinds of birds are. Or we can say that like it always means the same thing, but based on the context we choose different things. So a bird, in this view, you know, a penguin might be in fact the best type of bird if you're hanging out in Antarctica, right, where penguins are super common, and you say, have you seen any birds around? And you're like, yeah, I saw some penguins, right? That may be the first thing that comes to mind depending on the context. It's not as built in as it is in the prototype theory. Regardless of sort of which of these two views we subscribe to, and like I said, they're not mutually exclusive, they're getting at the same idea of these kinds of subsets, right? Whether we look at it like that or like that. They're both involving sets, larger order sets and subsets. A more central, more important concept that I want you to take away from this is this difference between semantics and pragmatics, whereby semantics is something more like the literal meaning of the words, like the truth conditions that we were looking at before. And pragmatics has to do more with actual interpretation, what people actually mean, right? And that this actual interpretation depends crucially and heavily on context. As we saw here, right? The pragmatics is the relevant subset based on the context. So that in the case of this Malvo problem with the lady at the front desk, when she said pets, well, she actually just meant cats and dogs. She didn't mean all this other stuff. Let's take a look quickly at a couple more examples of how this context-dependent meaning makes a difference. In order to do this, let's flip back to those sentences that we saw at the beginning of today's lecture, which seemed a bit odd to us. They were pragmatically odd. Right, here's the first one that we talked about earlier, where Lucy says, driving from Indianapolis to Chicago takes 3 hours, and Rob says, no, it takes 2 hours and 59 minutes and 37 seconds. And rather than just taking these two sentences in a void, we're going to assign some context to this situation in which these utterances have happened. And the context for Lucy and Rob's conversation right now is that they're debating over driving distances between cities. They're just two friends, and they're in Indianapolis, and they're like, how long does it take to get to Chicago? Rob asks Lucy, or somebody else asks these two. And Lucy says 3 hours, and Rob says no, 2 hours, 59 and 37 seconds. There's something odd, given this context, there's still something odd about this. Rob is still kind of being a jerk, right? Because that's basically what Lucy said. So here, in this context, the literal semantics meaning is of how long this takes is 2 hours, 59 minutes, and 37 seconds, assuming Rob is correct. But pragmatically, we don't care about this level of specificity. Given the context, 3 hours is a good enough measurement. So the literal meaning of how long it takes is this. But pragmatically, we just kind of round up in our heads to 3 hours because nobody cares about that extra 23 seconds. 23. Ah, typo. 23 seconds. It says it correctly over here. Not 59 minutes and also 37 minutes. So in this context, Rob's being a jerk. That's what's important. Let's assign it to a new context, though. So the same conversation happens, but this time the context is that we're in a competition between trucks, like a truck race, as it were. And that, whatever truck can get to Chicago from Indy in the shortest time will win it all. It's some big truck racing competition in which Lucy and Rob are referees. And they're in charge of timing these trucks. Right? Now Lucy says, truck A made it in 3 hours. Right? And Rob corrects her and says, no, truck A made it in 2 hours, 59 minutes, and 37 seconds. Right? They're timing these trucks. Is Rob still being a jerk here? Not really, right? Here, this is a less pragmatically odd response for Rob to have. He's being less of a jerk here because of the context. The context matters. When we're just casually talking between friends, nobody cares between the difference. Nobody cares about the difference between 2 hours, 59 minutes, and 37 seconds to 3 hours. Those are equivalent. But when it comes to a race, we care. Semantically here, the meaning, the literal meaning, of course, of this is still 2 hours, 59 minutes, and 37 seconds. Ignore my typos once again. And pragmatically, it also means that because it's important for the context. In a racing context, these seconds, the 23 extra seconds, matter. Right? Context matters for the interpretation of meaning. We'll look at a few other examples of this and see that it matters for more than just numbers, right? Kind of. This is still a number-based thing, but if there's a fire, right? Imagine a situation in which there's a fire. 15 people are in the building, live in this building, and the lieutenant informs the fire chief about this situation. The current situation is that 14 people have been rescued out of this building, and there's one still trapped inside the burning building. And the lieutenant now says to the chief, okay, chief, everybody's out of the building. We can extinguish the fire now. Everybody's out. Everybody's out. What do you think about that situation? What do you think about this lieutenant's report that everybody is out? What, right? That doesn't make sense. Like, it's just not true, right? Like, there's people in there. There's a person in there. So this is not an acceptable 14 out of 15 isn't everyone. 14 out of 15 is missing a person. This is ludicrous, right? We're upset by this situation. Now think about the next context, an alternate context. In this context, we're walking on some beach. This is a beach in Chicago. That's where I'm from. We're walking on a beach in Chicago. And out of every 10 people we see on this beach, 9 of them are wearing flip-flops. Right? It's a nice day. It's sunny. Not altogether unlike weather that we're hoping for soon. And I have a friend in town from Europe in which, from a place where flip-flops aren't common, where nobody wears flip-flops. Only 2% of the population wears flip-flops when going to the beach, right? This is a hypothetical situation. But me and my friend are walking along this beach, and 9 out of every 10 people are wearing flip-flops. And he says to me, oh my goodness, everybody is wearing flip-flops. Everyone is wearing flip-flops. Do we have the same reaction? If 9 out of 10 people are doing it, and he says, everyone is wearing flip-flops. Like, this is okay. This isn't a weird thing to say. But if 14 out of 15 people are out of the building, you can't use everybody. Here in this situation, with 9 out of 10 people, you can say everybody. Right? And what we want to realize about this situation is that it's not about proportions. It's not like, oh, well, it's okay when it's 9 out of 10, it's 90%, but it's not okay when it's 14 out of 15. That's ridiculous. This is actually a higher percentage, right? So the math doesn't even check out there. It's not about the numbers game. It's about context. It's about situations. It's about situations. And that the context of an utterance, like everyone is wearing flip-flops, or everybody's out of the building, or something took 3 hours, the interpretation and the oddity of the sentence depends very heavily on the context. Very heavily on the context. All right. That's where we're going to stop. Today's going to be a little bit of a shorter session. The take-home points from today's lecture are this. We looked at the fact that words, rather than having concrete, definite meanings that everybody conventionally agrees on, we found that there's looseness there. There's wiggle room there. There's fuzzy boundaries and differentiating interpretations of the same word, like pets or like everyone. We looked at a couple different viewpoints that attempt to account for this fuzziness, that attempt to account for these different interpretations. A prototype theory that has some members as central and some as periphery. We also looked at this context-dependent theory, which is where we're headed now, which says that it always means the same thing, but the context determines the interpretation. And here we've hit a turn from semantics, which is more about the literal meaning of words and their compositionality, to pragmatics, which is how people actually use language. Semantics is about the literal meaning. Pragmatics is about meaning in context, about actual situational use. That's the take-home for today's. Next time, thanks for that beep. Next time, what we're going to be doing is looking at more pragmatic, how people actually use language situations. More in the realm of pragmatics, and seeing what people do with language. And that we do more than literal meanings with language. And that's what we're going to investigate in our next class. Our next class will wrap up this semantics pragmatics section. We did sort of 2 lectures on semantics. This is your first one on pragmatics. On Wednesday, on Monday, I'll be posting your second one on pragmatics. As a errata, something that I should have corrected from last time, I said we were going to have class in person on Friday. That is not true. Friday is Good Friday. We're not going to have class on Friday, thus we won't have our in-person class this week. Boo, I know. But come to my office hours if you're sad about that on Thursday, and you can talk to me there and get some face-to-face time, ask any questions that you have up to this point. Your next lecture will be showing up on Monday. Sweet. Okay, I'm going to stop there. Hopefully this made sense. We're starting to delve into the realm of pragmatics. Send me emails, come to office hours if you have any questions. Otherwise, I'll catch you next time.